everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to do one of my favorite book tags ever, which is the mid-year book Freakout tag. I know that this is a tag that I, like so many other booktubers, look forward to doing every year, and let me just say the obligatory, I can't believe it's already the middle of 2021. We are in the middle of June at this point, but here we are. And yeah, this tag, in case you don't know what this tag is about, it's basically questions all about your favorite and least favorite reads of the year so far. And as usual, with every book tag video that I do, I will link the original creator's video down in the description, as well as all the questions in case you would like to do this tag yourself. So without further ado, let's just get into it. The first question is favorite book that you have read this year. This is always the question that I agonize over the most, but I decided to pick one romance novel and one non-romance novel because most of my reading is romance, but I do read quite a few other genres as well. So for non-romance, I had to go with The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. TJ Klune has very quickly become one of my favorite authors ever since I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by him last year, and so this book is quite a bit different though, because this is YA, it's science fiction-y. It takes place in a world very much like our own, except superheroes exist. And we have our main character, Nick. He writes fan fiction for this one superhero in particular that he is absolutely obsessed with, known as Shadow Star. There's also a love triangle going on because there's this guy, Owen, who's kind of the bad boy at their school that Nick dated, I think, over the summer. But he's kind of an asshole. And then we have Seth, who is Nick's lifelong best friend, and there are romantic feelings between the two of them. So that's one of the many things I loved about this. But I also just adored the way that TJ Klune wrote the superheroes and just the story in general. There's a lot of amazing side characters. I mean, this is all you could want in a YA gay superhero story. And then for the romance novel, I had to go with, this was a pretty recent read for me, but that is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. This is just as incredible as everybody says it is, and shame on me for waiting this long to actually read this book, and just shame on me for waiting so long to read more from Mariana Zapata, because I read From Lukov with Love by her last year, and that ended up being one of my top favorite romances of last year. And yeah, I think it's safe to say that this is going to be one of my like top 5 at least favorite romances from 2021. And for those of you guys that don't know, Mariana Zapata writes super slow burn romances. This book is over 600 pages, but it's worth every page. This is a sports romance with a football player, Aiden, and then Vanessa, who has been working as his assistant. She quits her job. He comes back and asks her to have a marriage of convenience with him because otherwise he would have to leave the country and go back to Canada, where he's from. Yeah, I could go on about this book for days and days, but I'm going to make myself shut up. And so then the next prompt is favorite sequel that you've read this year. A lot of the sequels that I've read this year were a part of like companion romance series, and I don't really consider those series to be like actual series because there's no like overarching plot connecting all of the books or anything like that. But in terms of a sequel that I've read that is a part of an actual series in my mind, I had to go with A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. What can I say? I'm absolute trash for everything that Sarah J Maas writes, and of course this was her 2021 release. This is book 4 in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and this was Nesta and Cassian's story, and it was everything that I hoped it would be. Like I said, I love everything she writes, so like of course this book was going to find its way into this video. And the third question is new release you want to read. That has to be Neon Gods by Katie Robert. This is a book that, first of all, I got an e-arc for this months ago, and I just put off reading it because I really wanted access to the audiobook. And so now that the book has actually been released, I want to say it came out on June 1st. The audiobook for this is on Hoopla, by the way. Thought I would mention that. So I'm gonna read this really soon because like I said, I have the e-arc and now I have the audiobook as well. This is book 1 in a new series by Katie Robert, and this one in particular is a Hades and Persephone retelling. I'm gonna get to Katie Robert some more in this video, but just know I'm super pumped for this book. Everyone that I follow has been giving this 5 stars, so I have a feeling I'm gonna adore this. as well. Number 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. This one was such an easy question for me to answer. That's going to be The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. This is book 3 in her companion romance series, and I just recently reread The Bride Test, which was the second book in this series, and The Kiss Quotient, which is the first book of the series, is one of my absolute favorite romances of all time. You know, we're finally getting Kwan's story in this book. He is a character, a side character that has just been absolutely iconic in the other 2 books of this series. I'm really curious to see who Helen Huang pairs him up with, because I haven't read any synopses or anything for this book because I definitely want to go into it blind, but I have a feeling it's going to be just as amazing as the other 2 books, and I just love Helen Huang so much. I trust her with my heart and soul. Next up, we have question 5, which is your biggest disappointment. I'm going to mention 2 books for this. Most of the questions I have more than one answer for, so sorry not sorry. The first one I'm going to mention is The Martian by Andy Weir. At the end of the day, I didn't really know what I was getting into when I read this book. I didn't expect it to be so cerebral and scientific. I expected more of like a sci-fi thriller, and the book to be more based on thriller things and less on scientific things. I just think I'm too stupid for this book. So yeah, I trudged through it. I do think the audiobook is really, really good. If you want an audiobook recommendation, the narrator did a fantastic job. I think I would enjoy the movie more than the book, so I do want to check out the movie at some point. But yeah, this one was just like, it's me, not necessarily the book. And then the other disappointment that I'm going to mention is A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget Kemmerer. It's not necessarily that this book in particular disappointed me. It's that both this book and the book before it, which is A Heart So Fierce and Broken, both disappointed me together. Because I actually enjoyed this one a little bit more than A Heart So Fierce and Broken. And at the end of the day, I just feel like Bridget Kemmerer took this series in a direction that I didn't love, that I didn't like. I didn't understand why she did the things that she did with these characters and with the story, because the first book, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, was one of my favorite books of 2019. I still to this day adore that book. It's essentially a Beauty and the Beast retelling. But then the other 2 books in this trilogy, I'm just like, girl, why? Like, what are you doing? Then question 6 is biggest surprise. I have 3 books to mention for this question, and the answers are actually going into one of the other questions later on in this video, which is going to be about my favorite new to me authors. But the first huge surprise for me was Learn My Lesson by Katie Robert. This is book 2 in her Wicked Villain series. I never read book 1, but I just skipped to book 2 because I was so intrigued by the characters that this one was going to follow. If you guys don't know anything about this series, it's a dark erotic romance series that is a reimagining of Disney movies that we all know and love, where the villain of the story is one of the main characters in this instance. And so this one is a poly romance between Meg, Hades, and Hercules. And I was so surprised by this one because pretty much everyone I follow enjoys this series and gives the books like 3, 4-ish stars. So I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. I just expected it to be a fun, smutty romance time. And while it is that, there's something about this book in particular is still my favorite of the series, but I have loved the other books that I've read in the series as well. I've given them all 5 stars. There's something about her writing in this series and in this book in particular that totally took me by surprise. And just made me really feel for these characters. As much fun as I was having, I was also just really invested and almost just mesmerized by the story and by the writing. It's just so good, and it really, really works for me. So I do want to point out the plots for these books are pretty ridiculous and convoluted. I know some people really don't enjoy that, but that's one of the reasons why I loved this book and this series in particular. And then I'm gonna quickly mention 2 novellas that really took me by surprise this year. The first one is The Devil's Submission by Nicola Davidson. This is a historical romance that also incorporates BDSM and leans more towards erotica, I guess you could say. This one is a marriage in trouble story, one of my favorite tropes ever. And it does feature a plus-sized heroine, also features a dominant heroine and a submissive hero. Also, the hero co-owns a sex club with 2 of his best friends. And this one, again, I just expected it to be like a fun, smutty time, but I really connected with the two main characters, and I just loved the atmosphere of having a sex club in like the Regency era. I haven't read a ton of books like that before, and I just love Nicola Davidson's writing. Again, I need to read more from her because I absolutely adored this. And then another surprise for me in terms of a novella was Breaking the Bully by Jessa Kane. I know I've mentioned this novella quite a few times lately. This one surprised me so much because I know a lot of people that I follow read Jessa Kane. She writes a ton of novellas, my goodness. The woman comes out with a novella like I want to say every 3 weeks she comes out with a new novella. But she is an author that her plots are pretty ridiculous. I do want to point that out. There's a lot of unbelievable things going on, so I definitely think you need to suspend your disbelief for the most part. I do think that this novella is the most realistic one that I've read. It definitely feels the most authentic and real to me. But all that being said, everybody that I follow that reads her novellas gives them like 3, maybe 4 stars because they're so ridiculous and seemingly there's not a lot of substance to them. And I read this one in particular because of Brie from In Love and Words. I will link her channel somewhere, either up in the cards or down in the description. And she just raved and raved about this one and how it's one of the few bully romances that she's read that she actually really enjoyed. So once again, going into this one, I expected a fun, smutty time. I also went into it expecting a lot of angst because I knew the setup of this very much bully high school romance. But I quickly became addicted to Jessa Kane's writing style. All I can say is that this really is a spectacular bully romance. If you're someone that thinks that they hate that trope, I would still recommend giving this one a chance. All right, next question is favorite new to you author. So again, this is tying into my answers from the previous question. First and foremost, I have to say Katie Robert. I've read 4 of the books in her Wicked Villain series, have given all of them 5 stars. I'm really excited to read her, Touch of Taboo series soon. She also has a trilogy that is a poly vampire romance. Again, I can't wait to read Neon Gods. There's just something about her writing that really, really works for me. Although I will say I read The Marriage Contract by her recently and didn't love that one. I gave that one 3.5 stars, but that's one of her like older backlist titles. So I do think that now she's really, really coming into her own and into her own unique writing style and everything. I have to mention Jessa Kane. I have read, I want to say 5 novellas of hers, and 4 of them I've read within the last couple of weeks. Like, to say I am addicted and obsessed is putting it very lightly. Like I mentioned with my answer in the previous question, her novellas have pretty ridiculous setups and plots, and there are moments that can come off very cheesy. There's something about that though that really works for me personally. I have just really enjoyed everything that I've read from her. I will say I've given one of her novellas 3 stars and one of them 4 stars, but the vast majority of the ones that I've read I've given 5 stars. She is always constantly coming out with novellas, so I do think for the most part there's going to be a plot for everyone, although I will say she tends to stick to the innocent virginal heroine and the obsessive possessive hero, which is a trope that works for me most of the time, although sometimes her heroines are like a little too naive and innocent that it's like unbelievable and a little bit annoying, but somehow she still makes it work for me. And then another new to me author that I want to quickly mention is Tiffany D. Jackson. So I have read both Allegedly and Monday's Not Coming by her. Again, there is something about her writing that is just so addictive to me. She writes more YA thrillers, definitely more hard-hitting contemporaries. I cannot wait to read, I think it's called Let Me Hear a Rhyme, is one of her other backlist titles. Her most recent book is Grown, which is another book I'm really looking forward to. I just think she's one of the few YA authors that writes thrillers and mysteries really, really well. That's a genre that can get on my nerves pretty easily, but the way she writes them, it's spectacular. All right, question 8 is newest fictional crush. I have 4 characters that I quickly want to mention. The first one is Winter Makepeace from Thief of Shadows. This is book 4 in the Maiden Lane series by Elizabeth Hoyt. So this is a historical romance series. We've got some Batman vibes going on because there is a vigilante known as the Ghost of St. Giles. This one's amazing also because it is about a virgin hero, and we have a heroine who is a widow, and Winter is just everything. I could go on about all these characters, but I wanted to give you like a quick rundown of who each of these characters is. Next one is Ethan from The Intimacy Experiment by Rosie Danan. We have another cinnamon roll hero. You're gonna see that all 4 heroes that I mention are cinnamon rolls. That's definitely my favorite type of romance hero for sure. Ethan is a rabbi at a synagogue, and he is just so open-minded and sweet, and the way that he treats Naomi and cares about her and loves her, like, it's just so good. I'm gonna bring up this book again for another question because it's just amazing. I also have to mention Marcus from Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. Again, another cinnamon roll hero. I also loved reading about his struggles with dyslexia, his learning disability, and learning to overcome that. And he is just so sweet and sexy at the same time. This book also has a plus-sized heroine. We love to see that representation. It's just amazing. This book also incorporates cosplaying and fan fiction and things like that. And then of course I have to mention Archer from Archer's Voice. This is another virgin hero, another one of my favorite tropes. This one's more of a small town romance, definitely has like romantic suspense elements, and I feel like I'm one of the last people in the booktube community to actually read this, and I loved it just as much as everybody else. And then in terms of the next question, which is newest favorite character, so I have 3 to mention for that one. So I'm gonna bring back The Intimacy Experiment because Naomi, the heroine in this, she's an absolute icon. She is a retired sex worker. She used to work in the porn industry, and now I believe she's the CEO or another like top employee of this podcast. It's more than that though. It's this company all about sex education and teaching people how to pleasure themselves and their partners. But yeah, Naomi is just so sassy and real, and I loved getting to see her past come out in this book, and just seeing her and Ethan get together, 2 seemingly very different people. It's just absolutely everything. And also another selling point about this book is that it's so freaking sex positive and just modern and refreshing. So yeah, of course had to mention that one. Another favorite character of mine is Eve Brown from Act Your Age Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. She is such a messy character, but there is something so endearing about her. From the first page, I just fell in love with Eve. I mean, I also love Jacob, who is the hero of this story, but I kind of wanted to limit myself in terms of mentioning my fictional crushes and my favorite characters. But yeah, I just love Eve. I love her so much, so much. And then the other character that I have to mention is Alf from Duke of Pleasure by Elizabeth Hoyt, which is book 11 in the Maiden Lane series. By the way, I have a reading vlog where I binged the entire Maiden Lane series if you want to hear all of my thoughts on those books. But Alf is so iconic because she ends up taking on the persona as the Ghost of St. Giles. So we have a female Ghost of St. Giles. And I loved her romance with Hugh, who is a widower and he has 2 young boys, and seeing her interact with his sons. And she also has had to dress up as a boy her entire life to survive in St. Giles. And yeah, she's absolutely incredible. So those are definitely some of my new favorite characters. Question 10 is book that made you cry, and this one was very easy for me to answer. That is Succubus Revealed by Rochelle Mead. This is the 6th and final book in the Succubus Blues or the Georgina Kincaid series. To tell you the basic plot, we are centering around Georgina, who is a succubus. She has been alive for thousands of years at this point. I think she was originally a human in ancient Greece, and then she made a deal with a demon and she became a succubus. And the way that this series ends, there's also an incredible romance with this guy Seth, who is a mortal. All I'm gonna say is that there's a plot twist going on in this book in particular that I'm not convinced most authors could pull off, but Rochelle Mead knew how to write it. And by the very end, there's just a way that Georgina finds redemption that made me feel emotional, and I sobbed. I remember I was finishing this book at like 2 a.m. one night because I couldn't put it down. I had to read it like in one day, you know, and I was just sobbing by the last few pages. I just could not deal with it. I cannot recommend this series enough. I have adored every book. I've given them all 5 stars. This is a fantastic adult paranormal romance series, but this book in particular just brought things to a totally different level in my opinion. And then next question is book that made me happy. I'm gonna mention 2 books for this because they both made me feel similarly. I'm mentioning 2 romance novels that made me legit squeal in delight and in giddiness. The first one is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. There are moments throughout this book that Vanessa and Aiden have that just made me squeal. Like the first time they kissed, which, I mean, that probably wasn't until the last 100 pages. Like I said, this woman writes extreme slow burns. So when they finally kissed, I think I screamed. I think I was like listening to the audiobook while like doing my makeup one day, and I think I legit screamed. And there's just several little swoony moments going on between the 2 of them, and it's just, it's so good. Another book that made me feel kind of similarly is Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. Again, there were interactions that Jacob and Eve had with one another and just fantastic banter that made me just like scream internally because it was just so good and made me so happy. We only have 2 questions left. The next one is most beautiful book you've bought this year. I'm actually going to mention The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. This isn't the most stunning cover ever, but it is a pretty rare book at this point because of how popular the Bridgerton series is, because of the Netflix adaptation. And so the fact that I was able to find, you know, an original first edition with this stunning step back, and oh my goodness, the sky is falling outside, so sorry if you can hear that, but yeah, this step back is beautiful. And the very last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of 2021? I have a video that I made, I want to say in December of 2020, of 21 books I need to read in 2021. So any books that were featured in that video that I haven't gotten to yet, those are going to be the books that I need to read by the end of the year. I of course have other authors and books that I really want to check out, and especially because I recently finally subscribed to Kindle Unlimited, now I have a whole other TBR to deal with because there's just so many books that I want to read off of that service. So yeah, I think that's going to be the answer for my question. And with that being said, that is going to be it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed. I would love it if you would do this tag as well, and if you want, I would also love it if you would leave a comment down below if you just want to leave your answers down there. I love talking to you guys in the comments and getting recommendations from you and all of that. So yeah, I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!